NSure is an insurance company that was struggling to take advantage of the potential for growth brought on by the digital economy. They were being held back by the lack of insight into the risks attached to their entire change portfolio, as well as the continuous need for auditing, which created a massive disruptive impact on their organization year after year. A lack of cross-organization collaboration and years of managing their GRC in isolated silos had made it impossible to understand and visualize the impact of potential risks on an enterprise level. To drive better strategic decision-making at the enterprise level, NSure turned to Mavim. What follows is a brief demonstration of how Mavim can help organizations like NSure manage their governance, risk and compliance across organizational silos. What you see here is an overview of how NSure manages their processes, risks, controls, laws and regulations. All information is interconnected, which facilitates straightforward report generation and allows NSure to have a fact-based discussion around the necessary improvements to their GRC landscape. We will now show you how the integrated risk, process and control framework can be viewed from different perspectives. NSure's business process owners use the integrated GRC framework to zoom in on business processes and drill down to a detailed process to see which risks are exposed. For example, in the process closing agreement, a connection has been made to a specific risk. In this case, the risk associated with closing agreement. Is that the products are not aligned to customer demands. In this overview, you can see that controls have been defined to mitigate the risk in the process and to define the residual risk. This facilitates cross-organization collaboration, as process managers and risk and compliance officers can work together from one source to achieve defined business goals instead of working in silo-oriented technical BPM and GRC systems. NSure's risk managers leverage Mavim to gain a holistic perspective of all risks, associated processes, and the effectiveness of the defined controls. This allows risk managers to be able to improve business performance, report to the board on enterprise-wide risk appetite, and generate in-control statements based upon the result of an audit. NSure also use Mavim to monitor and report on their compliance to specific regulatory requirements. In this case, NSure was demonstrating their compliance to ISO 27002. All the interconnections between risks, controls, regulatory requirements and processes creates a relational model which allows you to create reports and dashboards in your BI tool of choice. NSure used Power BI to create a heat map of their risk universe. Here you can also zoom in on individual risks, but you can also filter on the risks that lack effective controls. The second line will now be able to assess the organization's performance based upon the process risk control framework created in the previous step. Next, we will dive into how NSure use Mavim for their risk control assessment and audit work. On the left-hand side, you can see the list of controls. Those controls can now actively be assessed. Laura is a risk and compliance officer for NSure. As part of the second line of defense, she assigns tasks to first-line employees to be able to gather evidence around the effectiveness of controls. In this case, Laura assigns a self-assessment task to Wouter Jan, connected to a control. Each end user has a dashboard where they can see which actions have been delegated to them and where they need to respond to give necessary feedback. In this case, Laura has asked Wouter Jan to fill in the control self-assessment for the topic Validate Terms and Conditions. You can see directly that the input has been collected, which is a signal for Laura to do a review on the assessment, and finally for the third line of support to perform an audit in a later phase. Finally, you can see the issue and action tracker that NSure used to practice continuous improvement. In the issue and action tracker, NSure can send messages to end users around issues of non-conformity, preventative and corrective actions. By zooming in on non-conformity 1, you can see where NSure had documented that they did not conform to the relevant regulation and what impact that has on the organization, as well as what ISO standard is applicable, and ultimately which controls were defined to mitigate this risk. By clicking on the defined control, you can see that the control has been deemed ineffective, and for that reason, a notification for follow-up was sent via the action tracker to the defined owner of this control, with a recommendation for how to improve it. With this functionality, NSure was able to track and trace improvements around their GRC practice.